This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us on our BCS CISMP Certificate in Information Security Management Principles webinar. We're very fortunate to have with us today Nigel Lamb, who is one of the UK's leading expert in security in general for IT systems. This is just one of the many subjects he covers. And I believe he also does his own consulting. And if anybody wants consulting experience, please get in touch with me and I'll pass you directly through to Nigel. In the meantime, really, this 3-day course, it's scheduled throughout the year. Please do come and attend. It's very important as testers that you understand really how you can influence security and have it built into the design and implementations of your systems. If you do join the course with us, I'll give you 150 quid off, but that's only for people who've bothered to attend the webinar. But in between times, I think the best thing to do is to let Nigel do the talking because he's the expert. Nigel, over to you, please.
Okay, fabulous, thank you. Right, good afternoon, everybody. What we're going to really basically do is just talk about this this strange beast, which is called the Certificate in Information Security Management Principles. It's run by TSG. I act as their trainer. TSG are an accredited training organization, and I'm an accredited training provider. So what on earth is this strange course, and really what makes this program different from all the other information and cybersecurity courses that are out there? And there are, as I'm sure you are fully aware, there are a stack of them, absolute huge list of courses around information and cybersecurity. So what makes this different to all the others? First off, it's got pedigree. We can go back to 1987, and one of the leading, if not the expert on the subject of information security, a guy called Fred Piper, emeritus professor at the Royal Holloway University, London, now retired. Yeah, he keeps coming back. And back in 1987, Royal Holloway asked if he would develop a master's degree in cryptography. Now, Fred's expertise is mathematics and cryptography. And his comment basically was, that's way too narrow. It was clear, as he stated, that a blind man could see it. People would need to understand the broader topic of information security and learn how to handle the data or their networks. Now that was his comment to this request. And then over the next few years, what he developed was a master's degree in information security through the Royal Holloway. And it was published, it was ready and available I think it was about 91, 92-ish, thereabouts. Yeah, it was heavily crypto flavored, of course, but the one thing it did have inside of it was this information security management element, because Fred wanted this broader picture. Now, not everybody is going to have go to university and study information security. And so the BCS and their examination board, which at the time was known as ISEB, picked the program up, the information security management element, from the Royal Holloway. They adapted it and adopted it, and all with advice and guidance from Fred. And it became a short 5-day course, and they termed it the Certificate in Information Security Management Principles. There were no other courses around like it. And when I'm saying no other courses, you may or may not know of an examination body called ISC squared or ISACA. they weren't even producing anything around this particular field. This was the first one. So it's got pedigree, and that is the main thing. In real terms, it's got to be the main thing. But if we look at information security management down the years, we can go back to the very early 1980s, and we can start looking at the first organization that took this seriously. And this was the Royal Dutch Shell. And they had an information security manual. And the UK Gov looked at this particular information security manual and started to build something, a whole platform around information security management. Hello, Marion. And that was in the early 80s. And information security management has sort of grown from that point onwards, right through to where we are now in 2021. And we can see that the master's degree and the BCS course has flowed in sync with the international view of information security management. The broad picture, we're not talking about necessarily delving deep inside the bowels of the organization. This is the broad picture. So it has sort of marched along in sync with what has been going on out inside the big bad world. So the syllabus for the CISMP program, or the BCS program as it's now known, has remained very much the same for the last 20 odd years, 30 odd years. But the content has naturally changed to reflect the current thinking, the attack vectors, the risk sources, the threat actors, threat agents, and so on and so forth. The vulnerabilities that we see inside of organizations with people, with process, and with technology. But we also have to look at it from, yes, and we bring this horrible word up called compliance, because there are organizations that are regulated. So all of that's got to kick in. But one of the things that did happen, and one of the things that remains today, is that people put everything into little silos. Now, whether you as software testers, if you are software testers, whether you sit in a little wee silo and don't necessarily see the broader picture of why something needs to be done to reduce any potential risk to a business, its objectives. All of this sits inside of the world of information security management. We can call it cyber if you wish, but it is information security management. And again, something coming out of Fred Piper, the conflict remains between security and business. And it does to this day again. And this is something he commented on a number of years ago. The problem is that security is often seen as a slow down mechanism, not an enabler or a moneymaker. It's one of those areas that everybody just says no, or it's going to cost us if we're going to put some mechanism in place, whether it's going to be a SIEM system, a SOC, whatever it happens to be, it's going to cost us money. But then we have to ask ourselves the question is, why is it going to cost us? Does it need to cost us? So this comment remains valid to this very day. Now, the BCS CISMP program attempts to change that narrative. Yeah, we know that cyber is the watchword, and it is the watchword, but also business context, business need, its obligations to internal and external interested parties, and addressing risks have always been a watchword. Cyber is new. It is new, but information security has always been there, something that we've got to address. And it's something that we tend to forget. We're now well and truly entrenched in cybersecurity, where we have to put a bunch of technical controls in place to stop the bad guys or bad girls getting in or out and doing whatever they're going to do. We're trying to prevent all that. But why are we trying to prevent all of that? Business models change, but information security management doesn't. It does not change. Cybersecurity changes because it's got to reflect the technical changes that are going on inside any business. But what we've got to start looking at, and what we don't do, is asking ourselves a number of questions. And the CISMP course tries to answer these questions. What is it that a business has that needs to be protected? Do we know? And invariably the answer is we have no idea what we need to protect, other than somebody turns around and says it's our cloud virtual-based infrastructure or our on-premise physical infrastructure. Well, yeah, fine, we've got to do that. But why are we doing that? Why does the what need to be managed? And this is where we get another little problem, because no, we don't know what the what is, and we don't know why the what needs to be managed. Then we've got to look at how the what will be managed. And that comes from the very top, from your senior leadership team, the CEO, board, and others. Comes from them. They drive it. And it filters all the way through into the various objectives, functional level objectives, service level objectives that an organization has. And even though these may not be written down, they are there, they sit there. And it's to these objectives that we have got to address. We've got to make sure we fulfill these objectives. So how the what is going to be managed needs to be considered. And then eventually who will be involved and when. Now, if you take any part of an organization, any function, any service of an organization, we'll suddenly start looking at, if we break the silos down, if that's at all possible, if we break those silos down, all of a sudden it becomes quite obvious, it does become quite obvious, that we're all involved. Everybody's involved. Why do we have software testing? You could probably answer that question far better than I could. But from my perspective, why do I need to have good quality software, applications, and so on and so forth? Why do I need it? Well, yeah, okay, functionally, it's got to do what it says on the tin. But at the same time, I need
We've lost your sound.
my audio disappeared. I didn't say anything. So we will actually understand who will be involved and when people will be involved. And the BCS program, as I've stated, is a training program. It's not an academic program. It used to be part of, and it potentially still is part of, the Royal Holloway's program. This runs over 3 days, used to be 5, and it will address these questions, the business requirements of managing information security, trying to provide the answers to the what, the why, the how, the who, and the when. As a subject, as it says here, information security is a mile wide and a mile deep. CISMP tries to reduce that width and that depth to a manageable but practical size. Takes into account those new to the subject. So if you have absolutely zero idea about information, and indeed, let's pop it in there, cybersecurity, takes those people into account. And as it will also take into account specialist knowledge, specialist skills, software testing, infrastructure, data protection, legislation. Doesn't matter. We all have this, we all have a need, oddly enough, we all have this need for information security. And the one thing it will do, or attempt to do, is it will try to join all the dots from the CEO all the way through the organization, and tries to break down these silos to say to people, to functions, to services, that this, the whole thing, the whole organization is part of this process, not just technology. Now that syllabus there, and this is taken directly from the BCS program, those little tiles, information security management principles, talks about the language of information security, which is important. There are so many definitions of cyber, it's unreal, of cyberspace, of cybersecurity, of information security, of risk, and so on. There are so many different definitions, and what we try to do there is tidy things up. And we also talk about the why. Why do we need this? Well, we know we can just pick up any newspaper these days, and you will find there has been a breach, there has been an attack. One of the important areas of information security management is understanding risk. And that is one of the areas that we really seriously fall down on, information security risk or information risk. We talk about an information security framework, and the information security framework we talk about is any means to establish a framework for information security. And it's usually going to be based around an international standard. That standard is known as ISO IEC 27001. So it starts to pull that in, starts talking about the security life cycle, talks about controls, because from information security risk, we then implement or treat the risk by implementing controls of some kind, whether these are procedural or people-based, whether they're technical controls, or whether they're physical and environmental controls. We also got to look at disaster recovery and business continuity. And then, because this program was designed initially by Fred Piper, yeah, we're going to talk about crypto when we start looking at other technical aspects. So that's the syllabus, and that syllabus really, those headlines have not changed much over the last 20, 30 years. Now, I've been doing this particular program since February of 2003. So I'm aware of what it's about. And those headline tiles haven't changed much, but the content has. It has marched in sync with what is happening to this day. Now, just to give you a flavor, perhaps, of some of the content, we can go deep, or we could skim the surface. And here's one that's going quite deep. Because when we talk about information security, we're talking about the basic objectives, the principles of information security. And those basic principles, tenets, if you wish, are confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But one of the serious challenges is language. What does confidentiality mean? What does integrity mean? Now, this particular slide, which comes from the course, looks at integrity slightly differently to the way it could potentially be looked at. Integrity in information security is all around accuracy and completeness of information and data, but break that silo, break it away. Now look at integrity slightly differently. And this is a rootkit. Your software testers, you understand, you know about hooks, modifications, patching, Trojan into execution paths. You understand, you know this, you've probably tested these things. But it's a compromise of integrity of the trusted computing base. The levels of security rings from user mode through to kernel mode. And if we can rootkit, we can get to ring 0, kernel mode, we now own that machine, that operating system. We own it, it's ours. That is us compromising the integrity, but having compromised integrity, we can now start to compromise confidentiality. We can start to compromise availability. So that's one way of looking at integrity, which is what we look at on the course. We also start looking at other areas such as responsibility and accountability. And this is a fairly old case. This is Capital One data breach back in 2019. You can read all about it if you're that way inclined. Credit card applications between 2005 2019 were compromised from Capital One, affecting approximately 106 million people, their personal data. And who perpetrated this? Well, this was actually caused by an individual by the name of Paige A. Thompson. She has the hacker handle, and that's called she's called Erratic. She used to be a systems engineer with AWS, and then moved over to Capital One. So she understood exactly how to compromise the Capital One systems and was able to do so, and thus there was this massive breach. Who is responsible and who is accountable? Is Amazon, AWS, are they accountable, responsible? Well, let's look at it slightly differently. What Amazon say, Amazon S3 provides easy to use management features so that you can organize your data and configure finely tuned access controls. What Amazon do is they give you the tools. It's down to you to use them. So responsibility and accountability. Who is responsible? Who is accountable? Just another example of what we talk about on the course. We talk about legislation, regulation, standards. You all know, I am absolutely sure, you all know of the GDPR, the UK GDPR, the DPA 2018, but perhaps, maybe not, you may not have come across the California Consumer Privacy Act, which in its own sweet little way tried to mirror the GDPR, the European GDPR. We need to talk about it. Why do we need to talk about it? Well, within that particular piece of legislation, it talks about, it relates to natural persons. A natural person being a person who has a pulse, essentially. It's not an organization, it's not a business, a natural person. Resident in California, okay, that doesn't impact upon us. Where resident means those in the state other than for transitory or temporary reasons. So if you're passing through, it doesn't count. And those domiciled in the state, but are outside of the state for transitory or temporary reasons. So somebody who lives in California, but pops over to London for whatever reason, CCPA comes into effect. Do we actually look at that and say to ourselves, what about their data? How do we protect their data? We have failed quite dramatically since the 1984 Data Protection Act through to the 1998 Data Protection Act and the UK GDPR DPA 2018. We've failed miserably to protect people's personal data. Why? We try to answer that question. We look at cloud, and I'm sure you are more than aware of what the cloud is about. But people don't necessarily understand the complexities of the cloud and how complex it can become when you start throwing in legislation, international standards, regulatory requirements. So we start to delve into this particular little slide, and it gives us a whole bunch of things to talk about around cloud and how we try to manage the security of the data that's sitting in there, manage it. And that includes looking at it from a risk point of view, from a people point of view, from a technology point of view. We look at risk. We look at the risk process. Now everybody's got their ideas of risk, especially around information security and cybersecurity. There's more standards, there are more tools you can shake a stick at, and everybody defaults to a little RAG system of likelihood and impact, and they multiply two ordinals together to produce a what? What is it? What does it mean? Who knows what 25 means if we multiply 5 by 5? We've got ordinals and we've now got a nominal. So, I mean, does that actually make sense? Not really, doesn't. But nevertheless, we've got to do something. So we produce and we look at risk in some detail around, because that is what we're doing. We're managing the risk to the loss, or managing the risk to our data, our information, and our information systems. So it suddenly becomes important. We can go and delve into the world of PKI, public key infrastructures, and key management. We can go beyond this, but we start looking at it. And in the little wee box, where we talk about hardware security modules, we're talking about FIPS 140-2, but what on earth is FIPS 140-2? It's a requirement. So we talk about FIPS 140-2. We don't necessarily go into the other standards apart from 15408, which is linked to the common criteria. So we look at public key infrastructures, key management, and how important key management is within a public key infrastructure. We're not going to go delving into key splitting and M of N schemes, the Shamir secret key sharing. We don't have to go to that length at all, but it's there. It's available for us to talk about, and we can if we need to. So those are just some of the very, very skimming across the top content of the program. At the end of which there is an exam, a very simple exam. It's not a difficult exam at all. There's 100 multiple choice questions at the end of it. It can all be done online. You get 4 choices of answer, only one is correct. There's no negative marking involved. Pass mark is 65%. If you get 80 or over, you get distinction, and you get a nice little certificate to go with it. But I will emphasize, it is not a difficult exam. And there is a typical question. Malicious code is a type of control, risk, vulnerability, threat. And I'm sure you're all suddenly jumping at the answer to say that that is a threat. I hope, anyway. So that's a very, very brief intro to what the CISMP is about. I think the key points really is that it's got a pedigree. It has substance behind it. The headline syllabus has remained very much the same, but the content has kept abreast with what is happening in our world today around information and cybersecurity. Yeah, we will talk about cybersecurity, and we will talk about industrial control systems and so on. We have to bring that in because we have to manage all of that. That's what it's about. So at the end of that, that's it. That is the CISMP program. As I say, it's a 3-day course, run online. The exam is online. Hey, it's not difficult. It's not difficult. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask?
Yeah, hi, this is Ian Wood. What was the reasoning for reducing the duration from 5 to 3 days?
Yeah, good question. I think in the main, this is all down to the pandemic, the COVID situation. It just made life easier for people. Number one. Number two, people taking 5 days out of their normal week, people were beginning to question that. A lot of people enjoy taking 5 days out of the office, but I think in the main, I think it was all down to the COVID situation, and because it can all be done online, fairly straightforward and easily. Perhaps not the best answer, but that's the one I understand.
So there's no real sort of reduction of content then?
From my perspective, from TSG's perspective, absolutely not.
Okay.
In fact, you get the full 5 days in 3 days.
Okay.
So you're given heads up that there's a lot of content, an awful lot of content. I have this philosophy. I take you way beyond the syllabus, way beyond the current content, so that you can come down.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And one other question really is the sort of target audience. You talked about sort of software testing people and things like that, but could it also be for people new to sort of information security?
Absolutely, 100%. Let me give you
no prerequisites or anything like that.
Absolutely none. You may have to understand how to switch a computer on or something like that.
Right.
Let me give you a very brief, quick example. 4 years ago, an insurance company I was working with, the CEO had decided that he was going to take the entire company, the entire insurance company, through to certification to the international standard 27001. And what he said to the entire board was, you will sit this course. And they all sat the course. Yeah, there was a lot of humping and grumping on day one, but by the end of it, they understood the reason for it. So we can take literally a board, anybody inside the organization, in truth. No prerequisites at all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ian.
Hi there.
Hi, Benny.
Hi there. Question for me. So I know you mentioned about testing, and that's the kind of an area I currently work in, as well as like Scrum management. During this course, would that allow me to gain a good overview, possibly to like work within this area?
In your testing area specifically?
Well, into more like so project management, Scrum management.
Oh yes, absolutely. It'll give you a much broader, rounder picture of the entire area. Yes, absolutely, 100%.
Okay, and following this course I guess this is a bit more of an overview foundation course, would you say?
Overview. Yeah, I suppose you could. Yes, it is, but it isn't.
Okay.
Content you're going to get through TSG and myself will be there's an awful lot of content, and I think there's about 200 odd pages, and you will know that is not an overview, but what we do during the course perhaps is a skim through. Yes.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Okay, Vinny. Rich, did you have a question?
I didn't actually.
Okay.
Ian's covered it in the sense that we're working with a central government client, and forgive me, Bernard, you probably have been approached through Mel, so everything that's been feeding from global knowledge to yourself has been on behalf of myself. So he's asked the questions about the 5-day piece versus the 3-day piece, and we know that a lot of our competitors are still providing the 4 and 5-day BCS. So it was really to try and get that understanding when we're discussing with our client what the key differences were. we could quite simply have that conversation. And I know, Bernard, you have responded, so that is really helpful. Thank you.
The thing I would say about that, Rich, is there is no exam for the 4 or 5 day course. That exam has been retired.
Right.
The only exam that exists is for this 3-day accredited course now.
Fab. I think I got that. I think you're breaking up slightly, Bernard, but thank you.
I think that's a very good point, that it is the 3-day accredited program rather than a 5-day program. It is 3 days as an accredited program through the BCS.
And so that's an interesting point in the sense that when we deal with Resilia, etc., with the same central government client, we need to make sure that they do the exams, but on the CompTIA side of it, which is another part of it, they don't take the exams, interestingly. Is this course a definite that you have to do the exam, or you can take the course and not do the exam? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I come across a number of people who just sit the course and don't sit the exam. But what I do for them, and TSG I'm sure might be doing something similar, is I provide them with the evidence so that should they at a later time wish to take the exam, they can provide evidence to the BCS that they have sat an accredited training program. So we try and cut it that way. Facilitate, should they wish at a later date, wish to sit the exam.
And that's the usual 12 months span if they need it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, people don't necessarily. Some people really are quite frightened of taking exams, and understandably in many cases, and they don't do it. They just sit the course.
I think they're all waiting for the test centres to open after having the proxy exams.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The thing there, Rich, is that I am running remotely proxy exams online at the moment. So any exams, you can take the test centre when they're open. It can be overseen remotely, just like the courses.
Excellent.
Okay.
Just one question for me. This course, do you feel it's for any specific sector, i.e. private or public sector organizations?
No, it does not discriminate between sector. It does not discriminate between whether it's public sector or local government or just business, charities. It doesn't matter. It's and I think it's actually quite an important question you asked there, Benny, because information security, there are no boundaries.
Okay.
Cybersecurity, there are no boundaries, and it's open. Whether it's a little shop down the road or whether it's a giant organization with that has sites across the world, it doesn't matter. There are no boundaries.
Okay, fantastic. And I think I was just asked you earlier, so in completion to doing this course, is there any follow-up course that you would recommend or suggest?
Depending upon
within project management, testing capacity.
I would have to leave the testing side with Bernard. If you're going to start looking at it from the point of view of the security aspect, if you're going to go down that path, then there are a range of different programs that may benefit. I will leave the testing side with Bernard.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Okay, it sounds like we're about done with the questions. Thanks very much, everyone, for attending. And Nigel, thank you specifically for your learned opinion, as usual.
Okay,
we will send a recording of this webinar out to you. You can note it down, talk to your friends, but whatever you do come and benefit from Nigel's experience quite soon. And if you attended the webinar or registered for it, we'll give you 150 quid off the course. Okay.
Bernard, I think, did you answer the question from Bini about if there are other courses to recommend going down the testing side after you've taken something like this? I think Nigel said you would.
For the testers, obviously, there's the ISTQB Advanced Security Tester. That is very specific to testers, and that's, of course, what we have available. It's on our website.
Cool, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone. Again, thanks, Nigel.
Yes.
See you then.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you, Nigel.